Hi, I'm Maria. I'm 32 years old, and I live in San Diego with my incredible kid. For as long as I can remember, I felt like the dusty book on the shelf no one quite wanted to open in my very affluent, very polished extended family. They lived in sprawling houses in La Jolla and Rancho Santa Fe, while my reality was a modest apartment and a car that had seen better decades. Their lives seemed bathed in effortless sunshine and generational wealth. Mine felt like navigating a perpetual uphill climb, especially after I became a single mom relatively young. There were the holidays, the family gatherings, filled with strained smiles and thinly veiled judgment. The questions about my job, my car, my apartment, always phrased with that particular tone that implied I hadn't quite measured up. It was like a constant, low hum of less than that followed me. But through it all, there was one person who felt like solid ground: my grandpa. He was the quiet anchor in a family tempest, the one who saw past the surface, who seemed to understand the pressure I was under and the sacrifices I made. His house, though grand, always felt like the only safe space. When he passed away a few months ago, it wasn't just the loss of a beloved grandparent, it felt like the last true connection I had to a sense of belonging within that complicated family structure. Everyone, of course, assumed his considerable fortune would be divided neatly among the main branches of the family: my aunts, uncles, and their perfectly coiffed, privately educated children. The cousins I grew up feeling so different from, the ones who seemed to inherit not just wealth but an air of entitlement, were already mentally spending it. I went to the lawyer's office for the will reading with zero expectations. Maybe a small symbolic bequest, I thought. A piece of jewelry, perhaps. Something thoughtful, but nothing that would disrupt the established order. What happened in that room? The words spoken by the lawyer, the sheer shock that rippled through my relatives. It didn't just challenge their assumptions. It shattered the carefully constructed facade of our family, revealing cracks I hadn't fully seen, or maybe hadn't allowed myself to see. It exposed a truth about who my grandpa really was, and who he truly valued. And for me, it was the beginning of a journey I never expected, a path from feeling invisible and exploited to standing tall and reclaiming my own story. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, like you weren't quite enough for the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, maybe you'll understand a little of what I went through. Stick around, and let me tell you about the day everything changed. My earliest memories of family gatherings were tinged with the feeling of being slightly out of step. While my cousins arrived in shiny cars, their clothes always seemed a little newer, a little finer than mine. We weren't poor, not by any stretch, but my parents were firmly middle class. My dad worked a steady job, my mom was a teacher, and they managed well, but they weren't part of the elite circle my dad's extended family inhabited. They lived in a nice, normal house in a nice, normal neighborhood, not tucked away behind gates or overlooking the ocean from exclusive bluffs. This difference wasn't just about money, it was about a whole way of being. My aunts and uncles had certain expectations, a certain way of speaking, a certain casual confidence born of never having to worry about money. My cousins, boys and girls alike, seemed to glide through life with an ease I couldn't fathom. They talked about ski trips to Aspen, summers in Europe, riding lessons, sailing camps. My vacations were road trips to national parks. I loved those trips, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the stuff of my cousins' conversations. Over time, the differences became more pronounced, the subtle jabs sharper. My mom, bless her heart, tried to navigate it with grace, but I saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes sometimes. My dad, proud but perhaps a little intimidated by his wealthier siblings, often retreated into quietness at family events. It felt like we were perpetually auditioning for a role we could never quite land. When I got pregnant young, just after college, and chose to keep the baby and raise him on my own, the whispers escalated into open disapproval. A single mother? Oh, Maria dear, that wasn't exactly the plan, was it? My Aunt Carol had said, her voice dripping with pity that felt suspiciously like triumph. Such a shame, Uncle Robert had added, shaking his head. Such potential, wasted. Their pity wasn't for me, I realized later. It was for the perceived stain on the family's image. I was no longer just the less affluent cousin. I was the one who had really messed up, confirming their unspoken assumptions about my inability to thrive in their world. Raising my son, Leo, became my entire world. It was hard, so incredibly hard, balancing work, childcare, stretching every dollar. There were times I worked 2 jobs, cleaned houses on the weekends, just to make ends meet. I didn't have a built-in support system of nannies or trust funds. Every single thing I had, I earned through sheer exhaustion and determination. And through all of that, Grandpa remained my one constant. He wasn't like the others. He lived in a beautiful, sprawling house, yes, but he wore old sweaters and drove a modest car despite his wealth. He loved gardening, reading, and tinkering in his workshop. He never asked about my finances or lectured me on my life choices. He asked about Leo, truly asked, and listened with genuine interest to his milestones. He'd invite us over for quiet afternoons, just the three of us. We'd walk in his garden, pick strawberries, or sit on his porch swing, just talking. He'd tell me stories about his own life, his struggles, his values. He often spoke about fairness, about hard work, and about how money could change people, not always for the better. Some people, he'd said once, watching my cousins zoom around in their new sports cars, mistake comfort for character, Maria. Don't ever make that mistake. Character is built in the quiet moments, when no one is watching, by the choices you make when things are hard. I treasured those moments with him. They were a lifeline, proof that someone in that world saw me, the real me, and didn't judge. He'd help me out sometimes, quietly slipping me a check when I needed it most, always framed as a gift, never a handout. For Leo's future, he'd say, pressing it into my hand. Start a little something for him. He encouraged me to continue my education part-time, telling me, invest in yourself, Maria, that's a fortune no one can ever take away. His health had declined in the last year, and visiting him had become more difficult, tinged with sadness. The family rallied around him, of course, particularly my Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert, the most prominent and outspoken of the siblings. They managed his affairs, controlled access, and generally made it known that they were the ones truly devoted to his care, implying the rest of us were somehow less involved. I visited when I could, bringing Leo, and Grandpa's face would light up. Those visits felt pure, untainted by the usual family drama. When he finally passed, the grief was profound. For days I felt adrift, losing my compass point in the family. The funeral was a large, somber affair, attended by hundreds. The family put on a united front, dressed in expensive black, projecting an image of sophisticated sorrow. I sat quietly with Leo, feeling the familiar pang of being on the periphery. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The atmosphere in the lawyer's office was thick with anticipation. My aunts, uncles, and their adult children were all there, filling the room. I arrived just on time, slipping into a chair in the back corner, feeling like an afterthought. Aunt Carol gave me a brief, tight smile. Uncle Robert nodded curtly. My cousins studiously avoided my gaze. Mr. Henderson, Grandpa's longtime lawyer, a kind, dry man, cleared his throat and began. He spoke first about Grandpa's life, his legacy, his values. Then he got to the bequests. There were specific items, art, furniture, jewelry, mostly going to my aunts and uncles, divided as expected. There were charitable donations, large sums given to causes Grandpa cared deeply about. The family nodded along, satisfied. Then he got to the division of the estate's bulk. My client, Mr. Arthur Sterling. Mr. Henderson read, his voice steady and clear, has stipulated that his remaining liquid assets, property, and investments, comprising the vast majority of his estate, shall be divided as follows. He listed amounts for Aunt Carol, Uncle Robert, and their siblings. They were substantial, but not the entirety they seemed to expect. Their expressions shifted slightly, a hint of confusion. Then Mr. Henderson looked towards the back of the room, directly at me. "To my granddaughter, Maria Sterling," he read, "in recognition of her unwavering character, resilience in the face of adversity, and the quiet strength she has demonstrated throughout her life, I bequeath the sum of $20 million." The air left the room. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. $20 million? It felt like a number from a movie, not my life. I must have misheard. Mr. Henderson continued, seemingly oblivious to the sudden, stunned silence. "Furthermore, I leave to Maria Sterling my primary residence, located at 1450 Coast Boulevard, La Jolla, California, and the adjoining parcels of land, including the gardens and workshop. My grandfather's house. The place that felt like home more than any other. The place I had just heard Aunt Carol discussing plans to renovate and sell." A collective gasp went through the room. Aunt Carol's perfectly made-up face went white. Uncle Robert sputtered, his jaw dropping. My cousins stared at me, as if I had grown a second head. Mr. Henderson droned on, listing smaller bequests to other relatives and staff, but no one was listening. All eyes were on me. The silence that followed the completion of the reading was deafening, punctuated only by the sound of Aunt Carol's sharp intake of breath. Finally, Uncle Robert found his voice. "20 million? The house? Henderson, there must be a mistake. That can't be right." Mr. Henderson calmly folded the document. "Mr. Sterling's will was recently updated and is quite clear, Robert. There is no mistake." "But, Maria?" Aunt Carol's voice was a strained whisper, laced with disbelief and something ugly. "Why Maria? She's a single mother. She's had her difficulties. She hasn't contributed anything." The implication was clear. I was the black sheep, the one who didn't fit, the one who hadn't earned it, hadn't deserved it in their eyes. The entitlement, the casual cruelty of their judgment, hit me harder than the shock of the inheritance itself. "Mr. Sterling's will states his reasons explicitly," Mr. Henderson said, his tone hardening slightly. He picked up another document. He also left a personal letter to be read after the will. He put on his reading glasses and began. Grandpa's familiar, slightly shaky handwriting, transcribed onto the page, filled the silence. "My dearest family," Mr. Henderson read, "if you are hearing this, it is because I have passed on to whatever comes next. I have lived a long and fortunate life. Much of that fortune I built myself, through hard work and, yes, good luck. But fortune is not just money. It is also the people in your life." He continued, addressing each of his children and their families. He spoke of their accomplishments, their families, acknowledging their roles in his life. It sounded kind, measured. My aunts and uncles relaxed slightly, perhaps thinking the letter would soften the blow or explain his mistake. Then Mr. Henderson's voice shifted slightly as he got to the final paragraphs. "But a family is like a garden," he read from Grandpa's letter. "Some plants are showy, demanding attention, always in the sun. Others grow quietly in the background, providing support, resilience, enduring storms you might not even notice. For many years, I watched as some members of my family seemed to forget the value of the quiet strength, the unseen labor, the unwavering loyalty shown by one who was often dismissed or judged because her path was different." He paused, looking again towards me. My heart pounded in my chest. "Maria," the letter continued, and now Mr. Henderson's voice seemed to carry a note of genuine emotion. "My dear granddaughter, you chose a difficult path, raising your son with courage and grace, never asking for handouts, working tirelessly to build a good life for him. You have faced judgment and hardship with dignity. You have shown me what true character is. You visited me not because of obligation or expectation, but because of love. You listened when I spoke, and you brought sunshine into my life with your presence and young Leo's laughter. You never measured your worth by the size of your house or the make of your car. You built your worth through integrity and love." He cleared his throat. I have seen the struggles you have faced, the subtle ways you have been excluded or undervalued, simply because your life did not fit the mold others expected. This inheritance is not a handout, Maria. It is an acknowledgement of your strength, your independence, and your unwavering love for me and for your son. It is meant to provide you with the security and freedom you have earned, so you can continue to build a life of purpose and joy, free from the pressures and judgments of those who failed to see your true value. The letter concluded with blessings for us all, a hope that we might find peace, and a reiteration of his love. The silence this time was absolute, charged with fury and humiliation. My aunts and uncles stared at the floor, their faces red with shame and anger. My cousins looked bewildered, their expressions ranging from resentment to outright hostility. Uncle Robert finally stood up, his chair scraping loudly. This is preposterous. She manipulated him. She must have. An old man, vulnerable, he didn't know what he was doing. Mr. Henderson removed his glasses. Mr. Sterling was of sound mind until his final days, Robert. We had many discussions about his wishes. He was very deliberate in these decisions. Deliberate? Aunt Carol shrieked, her composure completely gone. He cut us out. He gave everything to her, the single mother in the cheap apartment. That did it. The shock began to wear off, replaced by a hot surge of indignation. Years of swallowing their insults, enduring their dismissals, feeling like a constant disappointment, it all boiled to the surface. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, but my voice felt steady. He didn't cut you out, Aunt Carol. He gave you millions. He just didn't give you everything. And what do you know about anything? Uncle Robert sneered. You've barely scraped by your whole life. I scraped by because I had to, I said, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. Because I didn't have the safety net you all took for granted. Because I chose to be a mother and worked my fingers to the bone to give my son a good life. While you were all living comfortably, I was learning the value of every dollar, the meaning of real work, the importance of standing on my own 2 feet. My voice grew stronger. Grandpa saw that. He saw the unseen labor, as he called it. The labor of raising a child alone, the labor of trying to build a life when everyone around you is telling you you're not good enough, the labor of enduring your constant judgment. Aunt Carol scoffed. Judgment. We were concerned. We wanted you to have a better life. No, I countered, my voice cutting through her false sympathy. You wanted me to fit into your neat little box. You wanted my struggles to be invisible so they wouldn't reflect poorly on you. You never offered real help, just criticism and pity. I looked around the room, at their stunned, angry faces. My cousins, who had barely spoken a word to me in years, now looked at me with open hostility. This isn't about the money for me, I said. Though that wasn't entirely true. The security it offered was immense. This is about Grandpa seeing me. Truly seeing me. It's about him validating everything you chose to ignore or belittle. He was senile, one of my cousins muttered. He was clear-eyed, I shot back. Clearer than any of you have ever been about what truly matters. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat again. If there are no further questions regarding the reading of the will, we'll be contesting this, of course, Uncle Robert announced, his voice ringing with false authority. You're welcome to try, Mr. Henderson replied calmly. As I said, the will is ironclad, and Mr. Sterling's mental capacity was well documented. I didn't say another word. I gathered my few belongings, nodded respectfully to Mr. Henderson, and walked out of the office. The silence behind me felt like a physical weight, heavy with unspoken accusations and bitter resentment. Stepping out into the bright San Diego sunshine, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. Shock, anger, sadness, but also liberation. The betrayal, the raw, undisguised greed and contempt I had just witnessed, cut deep. These were the people who were supposed to be my family, my support system, and they had openly attacked me, not just for the inheritance, but for the very essence of who I was and the life I had built. For days, I felt numb. The sheer scale of the inheritance was overwhelming, but the emotional fallout from the family's reaction was almost paralyzing. Their words, their faces contorted with rage and disbelief, it replayed in my mind constantly. The years of feeling less than, the constant effort to prove myself, the internal shame I had carried, it all surfaced, raw and painful. I received furious emails and voicemails. Aunt Carol accused me of being a gold digger, manipulating a dying old man. Uncle Robert threatened legal action, spreading rumors that I had taken advantage of Grandpa's supposed weakness. My cousins piled on, posting thinly veiled attacks on social media, implying I was unfit to handle such responsibility. The pain of their betrayal was immense. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the final, definitive proof that their love, their acceptance, had always been conditional, based on fitting into their narrow definition of success and worthiness. And when I had inadvertently surpassed them, they turned vicious. I felt isolated, adrift. Who could I talk to? My few close friends knew my family was difficult, but they couldn't possibly grasp the magnitude of this. I considered calling my parents, but they had always struggled to navigate the complex family dynamics themselves. I didn't want to burden them or put them in the middle. One afternoon, sitting alone in my small apartment, the weight of it all became too much. I cried until I had no tears left. I felt angry, wronged, and profoundly sad for the family I wished I had, the family I had always craved acceptance from. But amidst the grief and anger, a flicker of something else began to emerge, a spark of righteous indignation. Grandpa's words echoed in my head. Unwavering character, resilience in the face of adversity, quiet strength. He saw me, he valued me. His letter wasn't just about money, it was a testament to my worth, a counter-narrative to the one my family had fed me my entire life. Their fury wasn't about me tricking Grandpa, it was about being exposed. It was about their carefully constructed world of entitlement being shaken by the truth that the quiet one in the corner was the one deemed most worthy, most loved, not for what she had, but for who she was. This realization was a turning point. I couldn't change their reaction, their bitterness, their fundamental inability to see past their own privilege. But I could change how I reacted to them. I could stop letting their judgment define me. I could stop craving their approval. I decided then and there that I would not engage with their toxicity. I would not respond to the emails, answer the phone calls, or read the social media posts. I would not defend myself against their baseless accusations. Their narrative was their problem, not mine. I hired a lawyer, not to contest anything, but to handle the inevitable legal challenges from my family and to help me manage the inheritance wisely. My lawyer was calm and professional, reassuring me that Grandpa's will was indeed solid. We began the process of probate, which was, predictably, contentious. My family hired aggressive lawyers, trying every angle to invalidate the will, claiming undue influence, diminished capacity, anything they could think of. It was stressful, emotionally draining, but I held firm. I thought about Grandpa. He had been a shrewd businessman. He had seen this possibility, anticipated their reaction. His letter wasn't just sentimental, it was strategic, laying bare his intentions and his assessment of our respective characters. He had built a fortress of truth around his final wishes. I also started seeing a therapist. This was crucial. She helped me unpack decades of ingrained family dynamics, the subtle manipulation, the constant feeling of not being good enough. She validated my feelings of hurt and betrayal, and helped me understand that their reaction was a reflection of them, not me. She guided me in setting firm boundaries. It was okay, she told me, to walk away from relationships, even family, that were consistently harmful. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to heal. The inheritance provided immense practical relief. I was able to move us into a safe, comfortable house in a good school district. I paid off all my debt. I set up trusts for Leo's education and future. I didn't splurge on luxury cars or designer clothes, much to my family's imagined, I'm sure, disappointment. I lived comfortably, securely, but still within my means, still valuing the hard work that had gotten me here. The house. Grandpa's house. That was a different matter. It was more than just property, it was imbued with his memory, our shared moments. I decided to keep it. Not just to spite my family, though a small rebellious part of me acknowledged the satisfaction in that, but because it felt like the physical manifestation of his trust and love. I started spending time there, walking through the gardens, sitting on the porch swing, feeling closer to him. I decided to restore the workshop, exactly as he had left it, a quiet sanctuary for his memory. The legal battle dragged on for over a year, a constant reminder of my family's unrelenting hostility. They used their vast resources to make it as difficult as possible for me, but I didn't back down. I had Grandpa's legacy, his faith in me, and finally, my own self-respect to defend. During this time, I had minimal contact with them. I didn't initiate it, and when they tried, I kept it brief and transactional, usually through lawyers. The holidays came and went. No invitations, no calls. It was painful, the final severing of a tie, however flawed it had been, but it was also peaceful. The constant anxiety I used to feel around them was gone. The need to perform, to prove myself, vanished. Winning the legal challenge was less about victory over them and more about validation. The court upheld the will unequivocally. Their attempts to smear my character and question Grandpa's sanity failed. The truth, as Grandpa had written it, prevailed. After the legal battles ended, the contact ceased almost entirely. A few distant cousins reached out, cautiously, but the core group, the ones who had shown their true colors so vividly, vanished from my life. And I didn't chase them. The inheritance changed my life in profound ways, of course. Financial security is a gift beyond measure, especially for a single parent. It lifted a weight I hadn't realized how heavily I carried. But the most significant transformation wasn't external, it was internal. I started making choices based on my own desires and values, not on what others expected or what I thought I needed to do to earn approval. I went back to school, finishing the degree I had put on hold. I pursued interests I had long neglected. I invested time and energy into my friendships and, most importantly, into my relationship with Leo. I was a calmer, happier, more present mother. I learned to say no. No to unreasonable demands on my time or energy. No to guilt trips. No to people who didn't respect me. It was a powerful word, one I hadn't used much before. Setting boundaries felt not like being mean or difficult, as my family had always implied, but like self-preservation. It was drawing a line in the sand and saying, "This is where I end, and your issues begin. You are not allowed to cross it and inflict pain on me anymore." The unseen labor Grandpa mentioned, the emotional labor of navigating their world, the physical labor of building a life from scratch, the mental labor of constantly questioning my own worth, it had taken its toll, but acknowledging it, validating it, was incredibly freeing. My strength wasn't passive, it was active resilience, quiet determination, and the refusal to be broken by circumstances or by people. Walking through Grandpa's garden now, the one my aunt wanted to turn into a sterile, modern landscape, I see the wisdom in his words, in his actions. He didn't just give me money, he gave me permission. Permission to be myself, to value my own journey, to stop trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. He gave me the means to build a life where my worth wasn't debated or denied. My relationship with my extended family remains non-existent for the most part. There's a sadness there, a mourning for what could have been, for the idea of family I held onto for so long. But that sadness is overshadowed by the peace and clarity I now have. I am no longer the overlooked cousin, the one who didn't measure up. I am Maria, a strong, capable woman who survived difficult circumstances, who was seen and loved for her true self, and who built a life of value, independent of anyone else's approval. The betrayal was painful. a harsh lesson in the reality of conditional love and entitlement, but it was also the catalyst for my liberation. It forced me to confront the toxic dynamics, to choose myself, and to step into the power and security my grandfather intentionally placed in my hands. I learned that some fortunes are measured not in dollars, but in the strength of your character and the clarity of your self-worth, and those are fortunes that can never be taken away. So, that's my story. It's still unfolding, of course, life always is. But the core of it, the part about the unexpected inheritance and the very expected family drama it unleashed, has settled into a quiet strength within me. I am no longer defined by their judgment or their wealth. I am defined by my own resilience, my love for my son, and the path I've forged with my own hands, guided by the love of the one person who truly saw me. It was a painful journey, filled with moments of deep hurt and uncertainty, but it led me to a place of profound peace and self-acceptance. The cost of their betrayal was high, but the liberation it ultimately brought was priceless. Now, looking back, I understand that their entitlement and dismissal weren't just about me. They were about maintaining their own perceived status and control. My existence outside their norms was a threat to their carefully constructed identity, and Grandpa's will, by validating me, dismantled that identity in the most public way possible. I used some of the inheritance to establish a small foundation in Grandpa's name, focused on supporting single parents, pursuing education, or starting small businesses. It felt like the right way to honor his legacy, helping others build their own unseen fortunes through hard work and determination. It was a quiet act, one I didn't publicize within the family circle, but it brought me immense satisfaction. Living in Grandpa's house felt surreal at first. The grand rooms, the ocean view. It was a world away from my cramped apartment. But gradually, I made it my own. I kept his study and workshop exactly as they were, places of reverence and memory. The rest of the house I adapted, making it a comfortable, happy home for Leo and me. We filled it with laughter, with friends who loved us unconditionally, with the simple joys of everyday life. It wasn't a museum, it was a living space, vibrant and warm, a stark contrast to the cold formality it sometimes held during family gatherings when I was younger. The garden, too, became a source of peace. I spent hours there, learning about the plants Grandpa loved, feeling connected to him through the soil and the sunshine. It was a physical reminder of his lesson about different kinds of growth, different kinds of value. My relationship with Leo deepened during this time. He saw my strength, my struggle, and my eventual peace. We talked openly about family, about values, about choosing kindness and integrity even when others don't. I wanted him to understand that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in character, in love, and in living a life aligned with your values. Sometimes, I'd see one of my cousins around town, maybe at a grocery store or a park. They would quickly look away, pretending not to see me. There was no anger in me anymore, just a quiet sadness for them, trapped in their bitterness and entitlement. They had lost more than money. They had lost the opportunity to truly know a good man, my grandpa, and they had lost the chance for genuine connection by prioritizing wealth and status over everything else. I realized that the family dynamic I had been so desperate to belong to was fundamentally unhealthy. The constant need for external validation, the subtle put-downs, the hierarchy based on financial success, it was a toxic system. Stepping outside of it, even involuntarily through their rejection, was the best thing that could have happened to me. The people-pleaser in me died, a slow, painful death, but it died. In its place grew a quiet confidence, a certainty in my own worth that didn't depend on anyone else's opinion. I learned that being liked by everyone is impossible, and striving for it is a form of self-betrayal. It is far more important to respect yourself, to live authentically, and to surround yourself with people who lift you up, not tear you down. My story isn't unique. So many women, so many people, carry the weight of unseen labor, endure subtle or overt betrayals, and shrink themselves to fit into boxes built by others' expectations. My journey was catalyzed by an extraordinary event, the inheritance, but the emotional core, the pain of betrayal, the struggle for self-worth, the fight for boundaries, is universal. It took losing my grandfather, facing my family's true colors, and enduring their attacks to finally see myself clearly. I wasn't the disappointment they saw. I was the resilient one, the loving mother, the person who valued character above all else. And in the end, the only person whose validation truly mattered was my own, and the validation of the man who knew me best and chose to honor the truth of my life. My life now isn't without challenges, but they are different challenges. They are the normal ups and downs of life, not the constant, draining battle for acceptance and respect from the people who should have given it freely. I have peace. I have security. And most importantly, I have myself, finally whole and unafraid. And that, I've learned, is a priceless inheritance. Thank you for letting me share my story. It's been a journey from feeling small and overlooked to standing confidently in my own light, thanks in large part to my grandfather's incredible gift and the painful, but necessary, wake-up call from my family. If anything in my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the black sheep or struggled with family dynamics, please know you're not alone. Your worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion, least of all those who fail to see your true value. Your strength, your resilience, your unseen efforts, they are real, and they matter. If you connected with this story, I'd be so grateful if you'd give this video a like. Subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more stories of navigating life's complexities and finding your own path. And please, share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, wherever you are in the world, whatever your journey has been. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and you deserve to live a life where you are seen, valued, and loved for exactly who you are. Take care.